There's a strange kind of pain that comes from not knowing where you stand in someone's heart. Not rejection, not acceptance, just uncertainty. And if you're honest, that uncertainty has probably followed you longer than you'd like to admit. You tell yourself you're fine. You keep busy. You focus on work, on goals, on responsibilities. But then her name appears on your phone, or someone mentions her, or you see something that reminds you of her, and suddenly all those carefully stacked thoughts inside your mind collapse into the same question you've been carrying for months, maybe years. What did she really feel about me? Before we go any further, if these conversations help you feel understood in a way most people never do, consider subscribing. Not because you need more advice, but because sometimes it's nice to have a place that puts words to things you've carried alone. Now, most men think they want certainty, but often what they really want is relief. Relief from replaying moments, relief from wondering if they imagined everything, relief from asking themselves whether they missed something that was right in front of them. Because there are memories that refuse to stay in the past, a certain look, a conversation that lasted longer than it needed to, the way she smiled before looking away, the message she typed, deleted, then sent something simpler instead. And even now part of you wonders, was it real, or was it all in your head? What's interesting is that many men assume feelings are obvious when they're strong, but human beings rarely work that way, especially when emotions matter. When people care deeply, they often become more complicated, not less, more cautious, more confusing, more afraid. And that brings us to something almost nobody talks about. Sometimes the strongest feelings leave the weakest evidence. Think about that. The woman who barely cares may flirt openly, speak freely, take risks because she has very little to lose. But a woman who genuinely values someone, sometimes she becomes careful, very careful, not because she's playing games, not because she's trying to create mystery, because losing something important hurts more than losing something casual. So she hesitates, questions herself, rewrites texts, overthinks conversations, and from the outside, it can look exactly like indifference. That's what makes this so difficult. You're trying to interpret feelings through behavior, but behavior is filtered through fear, and fear changes everything. I once noticed this pattern in a couple who eventually married. Years before they got together, the man assumed she wasn't interested. Why? Because she rarely initiated conversations. She seemed reserved, almost distant. Meanwhile, she later admitted something he never would have guessed. Every time she saw his name appear on her phone, her heart raced. Every time they talked, she replayed the conversation afterward. Every time another woman got close to him, she felt a quiet jealousy she never revealed. But she kept most of it hidden. Not because she didn't care, because she cared too much. Now, I'm not saying every woman secretly feels this way. Life isn't that simple. People are different, situations are different, but many men underestimate how often feelings exist beneath behavior that seems neutral, and that's where things become painful. Because uncertainty creates stories. Your mind hates unfinished endings, so it fills the gaps. Maybe she liked me, maybe she didn't, maybe I waited too long, maybe I wasn't enough, maybe. The human mind can spend years trapped inside a single unanswered question. What's even stranger is that the question often isn't about her at all. It's about you, your worth, your desirability, your fear of being forgettable. And there's one moment that reveals this more clearly than almost anything else, a moment that most men experience in silence. Late at night, when they're alone, when nobody is watching, when they suddenly wonder whether the woman they can't stop thinking about ever thinks about them too. Not once, not occasionally, but in the quiet moments. The way he thinks about her, because if she does, everything changes. And what many men never realize is that the answer to that question often hides inside something much smaller than love, something subtle, something easy to miss. And once you notice it, you start seeing her feelings very differently. Have you noticed how the moments that stay with you are rarely the dramatic ones? It's usually something almost invisible. She remembers the coffee you always order without asking. She notices when you're quieter than usual before you even say you're tired. Months later, she brings up a joke you made once, one you barely remember telling. Most people don't store details like that by accident, not always because they're in love, but often because somewhere inside you've become emotionally important, and emotional importance has a strange way of revealing itself. Not through grand speeches, through attention, quiet attention, the kind that doesn't ask for applause. Imagine this. You're standing with a group of friends. Everyone is talking, laughing, interrupting each other. You tell a story. Everyone laughs. But while everyone else moves on to another conversation, she looks at you for just a second longer. Not smiling anymore. Just looking. As if she's still thinking about something you said, that tiny pause. Most people ignore it. But moments like that often carry more emotion than the loudest compliments, because attention lingers where feelings already exist. There is something else that happens too. Sometimes a woman becomes unexpectedly protective of the version of herself she shows you. Around other people she's relaxed, carefree, maybe even loud. But around you, she checks her words. She wonders if she sounded awkward. She laughs, then immediately wonders whether she laughed too much. It's easy to mistake that for discomfort. Sometimes it is. But in many cases it's something softer. When someone's opinion begins to matter, self-awareness quietly grows beside it. You've probably experienced this yourself. You tell yourself you're going to act normal. Completely normal. Then she walks into the room. Suddenly you're aware of your posture, your voice, your hands. Even the silence feels louder. Feelings often make us less natural before they make us more comfortable. That's one of those strange little contradictions nobody prepares us for. And yet, many men still judge interest by confidence. If she liked me, they think, she would have made it obvious. Maybe. Sometimes. But people carry different histories, different fears, different ways of protecting themselves. Someone who has been disappointed before may move slowly. Someone afraid of rejection may hide behind humor. Someone who values emotional safety might wait for consistency before showing vulnerability. That doesn't guarantee attraction, but it explains why attraction doesn't always look the way movies taught us it should. There's another detail that's surprisingly easy to miss. Pay attention to how she reacts when you unexpectedly disappear for a while. Not as a strategy, not as a game. Life simply gets busy. You stop texting because work becomes overwhelming. Days pass, maybe a week. Then you talk again. Some women respond politely. Conversation continues. Nothing changes. But sometimes, there's relief. Tiny relief. She doesn't say, "I missed you." Instead, she asks, "You've been busy?" Or, "I was wondering where you went." Simple words, almost casual. But beneath them is something warmer. She isn't asking only about your schedule. She's asking whether your absence had anything to do with her. Because when someone matters emotionally, silence rarely feels neutral. Silence becomes a question. Did I do something wrong? Did he lose interest? Will things feel different now? Those thoughts don't belong only to men. Women carry them too, often without saying a word. But here's where many good connections quietly fall apart. Each person is waiting for the other to be just a little braver. He thinks, "If she wanted me, she'd show it." She thinks, "If he really cared, he'd say something." So both remain careful. Both protect themselves. Both mistake caution for certainty. And nothing happens. Months pass, sometimes years. It's heartbreaking because neither person was rejecting the other. They were simply afraid of becoming the one who cared more. That fear is incredibly human. None of us enjoy standing emotionally exposed while waiting to see if someone will meet us there. So we build small walls, not to keep love out, to soften disappointment if it never arrives. But walls have a habit of hiding us from the very people we hope will see us. And there is one wall in particular that changes almost everything. It doesn't look like fear. It doesn't sound like insecurity. In fact, most men mistake it for confidence. When she starts creating just a little emotional distance, not because she's stopped feeling something, but because she's trying to protect what she's already feeling. That's the moment nearly everyone misunderstands. And once you recognize why that happens, you'll begin to see one of the quietest signs she's been carrying feelings for you much longer than you ever imagined. There's a moment that confuses almost every man. It happens so quietly that, by the time he notices it, he's already convinced himself of the wrong story. She becomes just a little harder to read. Not cold, not distant enough to disappear. Just different. Her replies are still kind, but they feel more measured. She smiles, but she doesn't always stay as long as she used to. Sometimes she ends the conversation first. Sometimes she looks at you, then looks away before your eyes fully meet. And your mind immediately reaches for the explanation that hurts the most. She's losing interest. Maybe. That can happen. But it isn't the only explanation. Sometimes emotional distance isn't created because feelings are fading. Sometimes it's created because feelings are becoming harder to control. People often imagine vulnerability as crying or confessing love. But vulnerability starts much earlier than that. It begins the moment someone realizes, "You have the power to hurt me." That realization changes everything. Before feelings become deep, conversations feel light. You say whatever comes to mind. You don't worry much. If things don't work out, life goes on. But when someone starts mattering, every interaction carries weight. A delayed reply suddenly feels personal. A cancelled plan lingers in your thoughts. A sentence that once meant nothing is replayed over and over. Not because you're weak, because your heart has quietly decided this person is important. Many women experience that shift too, sometimes without even wanting to. Picture this. She's getting ready to see you. She changes her outfit once, then again, then laughs at herself because she's acting like a teenager. She tells herself it doesn't matter. Yet somehow, it does. She walks into the room pretending everything is normal. Meanwhile, her mind is asking questions she would never say aloud. Does he notice me today? Does he seem happy to see me? Why do I care so much? None of those questions ever leave her lips. So from the outside, she simply looks calm. This is why behavior can be misleading. The loudest emotions are often hidden beneath the quietest expressions. And then something unexpected happens. She begins protecting herself from possibilities that don't even exist yet. You mention a female coworker, nothing unusual, just a passing comment. She smiles, keeps listening, maybe even asks another question later that evening. For reasons she can't fully explain, that conversation comes back, not because she believes you've done something wrong, because uncertainty has a way of growing in silence. She wonders whether there's someone else, whether she's imagining things, whether she's already too emotionally invested. Again, this doesn't happen with everyone, and it doesn't mean jealousy always equals love. Human emotions are much more complicated than that. But when someone occupies your emotional space, your imagination starts filling in blanks, sometimes kindly, sometimes painfully. There's another sign that's even more subtle. She starts noticing changes in you before anyone else does. Not because she's trying to analyze you, because attention naturally follows emotional attachment. You walk a little slower. She notices. Your laugh sounds forced. She notices. You're quieter than usual. She notices. You never asked her to pay attention. She simply does, without realizing she's doing it. That's what genuine care often looks like. Not constant talking, not dramatic romance, careful observation, the kind that's almost invisible until you look back. And maybe that's why some men spend years misunderstanding women who genuinely cared about them. They were waiting for fireworks, while she was quietly memorizing the little things. The way you rubbed your neck when you were stressed, the songs you skipped, the dreams you mentioned only once, the date you forgot. But she remembered. Because feelings don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they collect details, one by one, like tiny photographs stored in a place nobody else can see. But there's one detail that surprises even me after years of watching relationships unfold. It's the moment she almost tells you. Almost. The words reach the edge of her lips, then disappear. She changes the subject, laughs, looks away, pretends she forgot what she was going to say. Most men think nothing happened. In reality, an entire emotional battle may have taken place in those few silent seconds. And if you knew what was happening inside her mind during that pause, you might never look at silence the same way again. There are silences that mean nothing. And then there are silences that carry more emotion than words ever could. Most people never learn the difference. They assume that if someone feels something deeply enough, they'll eventually say it. Life would be much simpler if that were true. But people don't always hide their feelings because they're dishonest. Often, they hide them because those feelings feel too valuable to risk. Imagine the two of you sitting together after everyone else has gone home. The conversation has slowed. Neither of you is trying to impress the other anymore. There's no performance, just quiet. She asks you something small. What made you choose that job? It's an ordinary question, or at least it sounds ordinary. You answer. She listens, really listens, not waiting for her turn to speak, not checking her phone. Her eyes stay with you. You begin talking about things you don't usually tell people, not because you plan to, because somehow it feels safe. That feeling is easy to overlook. We often think attraction begins with excitement. Sometimes it does, but lasting emotional connection often begins with safety. The feeling that you don't have to edit every sentence. The feeling that silence doesn't need to be filled immediately. The feeling that you can say, "I don't really know," without worrying that someone will think less of you. When a woman begins creating that kind of space for you, something meaningful may be growing. Not guaranteed, not every time, but often enough that it's worth noticing. And here's where things become unexpectedly complicated. The closer she feels to you emotionally, the more she may become afraid of changing what already exists. That sounds strange, doesn't it? You'd think stronger feelings would make someone more willing to speak. Sometimes they do. Other times, they create hesitation. Because friendship feels safe. Shared routines feel safe. The little messages, the familiar conversations, the inside jokes. What if one confession destroys all of it? What if saying one honest sentence costs her every comfortable moment you've already built together? Fear has a quiet voice. It rarely says, "Don't fall in love." Instead, it whispers, "Maybe tomorrow. Wait until you're more certain. Don't ruin this." And tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Eventually, both people become experts at pretending nothing is happening. You've probably seen it. Maybe you've lived it. Two people who care about each other, both hoping for one clear sign, both offering little hints, neither offering certainty. She sends you something that reminded her of you, a song, a photo, a funny video. It isn't important by itself. It's the pattern. You're showing up in her ordinary moments. That's significant. We rarely think about people who don't matter while we're simply living our day. When someone becomes part of your inner world, they appear without invitation. Walking through a store, hearing a certain song, watching the rain. Suddenly, "I think he'd like this." Those thoughts arrive quietly. They don't ask permission, and that's one of the gentlest ways affection grows. Not through dramatic declarations, through repeated moments of remembering. There's another detail that almost nobody notices. Watch what happens when you're genuinely happy, not performing, not trying to impress anyone, just happy. Maybe you're laughing with friends, talking about something you're passionate about, focused on life instead of trying to win her attention. Sometimes she'll simply watch. There's warmth in that look, not because she's admiring perfection, because joy is deeply attractive when it's real. People who care about us often enjoy seeing us become more ourselves, not because they own that happiness, because they feel connected to it. And then, there are the moments when life becomes difficult. You don't pretend everything is fine. You admit you're struggling. Maybe you're disappointed. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you simply say, "It's been a rough week." If she responds with patience instead of trying to immediately fix you, if she stays present instead of disappearing when things aren't easy, that tells you something important. Real affection usually isn't measured by how someone stands beside your best moments. It's often revealed by whether they quietly remain during the ordinary, messy ones. Still, even after all these signs, one question remains, the biggest one, the one that keeps so many men awake longer than they'd ever admit. If she's been carrying these feelings, why didn't she ever say them? The answer isn't what most people think. In fact, it has far less to do with courage than it does with something every human heart protects, almost without realizing it. Maybe you've blamed yourself for years, not out loud. Most men don't. They carry it quietly, a thought that appears when the room is dark and everything else has gone still. If she really felt something, she would have told me. It's such a convincing idea, simple, clean, easy to believe. But human hearts are rarely simple, especially when something truly matters. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you wanted to say something important and didn't? Not because the words weren't there, they were. You could almost feel them pressing against your chest. But then another thought arrived. What if I ruin everything? That thought has stopped more honest conversations than a lack of love ever has. Women experience that fear too, sometimes in different ways, sometimes for the exact same reasons. She may have worried that she misunderstood your kindness, that your attention was simply your personality, that your late-night conversations meant friendship to you but something more to her. So she waited, looking for certainty, looking for one unmistakable sign. And while she was waiting, you were waiting too. It's almost heartbreaking when you think about it. Two people hoping the other will be brave first, neither realizing they're both standing on the same edge. There is another possibility that's harder to accept. Sometimes she did try, just not in the language you were expecting. Not everyone says, "I have feelings for you." Some people say it by making time for you over and over again, by remembering things nobody else remembers, by asking how your interview went 3 weeks later, by noticing that your smile doesn't quite reach your eyes, by texting, "Did you get home safely?" when everyone else assumed you already had. Those moments are easy to dismiss. They're so ordinary, but genuine care often hides inside ordinary things. Love, or the beginning of it, isn't always loud. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it looks like consistency. Sometimes it appears as someone quietly choosing you again and again without making a speech about it. Of course, none of this means every kind gesture is secret affection. People can simply be kind. They can care deeply as friends. That's why real emotional maturity isn't about convincing yourself that every smile has a hidden meaning. It's about paying attention without forcing a conclusion, allowing people to reveal themselves over time. Because time has a way of uncovering what words cannot. And perhaps that's the realization I hope stays with you after today. Instead of asking, "Did she ever love me?" try asking something gentler. How did we make each other feel? That question changes everything, because even when relationships don't become what we hoped, the moments were still real. The laughter wasn't imaginary. The comfort wasn't fake. The way she relaxed around you, the way you looked for her in a crowded room, those experiences mattered because they happened, not because of how the story ended. And if she's still part of your life, don't become obsessed with decoding every glance or every message. Be present, be honest. Let your actions reflect what your words sometimes struggle to say. People often respond to emotional safety more than emotional perfection. If she's no longer in your life, don't let unanswered questions convince you that you are never enough. Sometimes timing is wrong. Sometimes fear wins. Sometimes two good people simply miss each other by inches. That doesn't erase what existed between them. It simply reminds us that being human is complicated, messy, beautiful, quiet. And before we leave each other today, I want you to carry one thought with you. There may be someone, somewhere in your past, who remembers your laugh more clearly than your face, who still smiles when a certain song begins, who occasionally wonders what your life looks like now. Not because they couldn't move on, but because some people leave gentle fingerprints on our hearts. They don't disappear, they simply become part of the story we carry forward. Maybe that's exactly what you've been to her. Or maybe Without realizing it, that's exactly what she's always been to you.